I was refinishing my grandmother's dining table when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I almost didn't check it. My hands were covered in wood stain, and I'd been in that satisfying kind of focused silence that only comes when you're doing something with your hands. My grandmother was sitting in her garden just outside the workshop door, deadheading her roses, humming something soft and old that I didn't recognize. It was a Saturday in late October, the kind of cold, bright afternoon that makes everything in Ontario look like it was shot for a calendar. The text was from my brother. "Hey, just so you know, me and Denise are heading to Mexico for a bit. Using some of the respect money to cover it. You and Grandma will be fine." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the workbench, picked up my staining cloth, and kept working. But my hands had gone completely still. He used the word some. My brother always uses the word some when he means all. Let me back up, because this story doesn't make sense without the context of who we are and what that account actually meant. My grandmother came to Canada from the Philippines in 1978 with my grandfather, $40, and a suitcase held shut with a belt. They settled in Mississauga, worked themselves to the bone. My grandfather in construction, my grandmother doing alterations and tailoring out of their basement, and by the time I was born, they had built something real. Not extravagant, but real. A house that was paid off, a car that ran, and a deep, almost religious belief that education was the thing you protected above everything else. When my grandfather died, he left behind a registered education savings plan and Respart that he had been quietly contributing to for 15 years. It wasn't for my brother. It wasn't for me. It was for whoever came next, for the grandchildren and their grandchildren if possible. My grandmother was named the primary account holder, and my grandfather's lawyer had been very specific in the documentation. The funds were designated for post-secondary education expenses only, and any withdrawals required co-authorization. That co-authorization was me. I'm 31. I work in financial planning, have for almost 8 years now. When my grandmother asked me 4 years ago to take on the co-authorization role after my uncle moved to Vancouver and stopped being reliably reachable, I said yes without hesitation. It felt like an honor. I took it seriously. My brother is 36. His name is Marco. He is charming, loud, and the kind of person who turns every dinner into an event and every problem into someone else's fault. He married Denise 3 years ago. Denise is fine. Mostly. A little too agreeable with Marco. A little too quick to call things unfair when they don't go her way. Together they have the energy of a couple who believes the universe owes them a good time. For the past 2 years, Marco had been asking about the Respart money. Not directly at first. Just comments. That account's sitting there doing nothing. Or, Lola doesn't need all of that, she's got her pension. Then more directly, can't we just use some of it for a down payment? We'd pay it back. Each time I said no. Each time I explained, again, what the account was for, what the legal restrictions were, and what the consequences would be for unauthorized withdrawals. Each time, Marco would get quiet in that particular way of his, the way that meant he wasn't agreeing, he was just waiting. I knew he hadn't stopped thinking about it. What I didn't know, what I found out later, piecing it together, was that about 6 weeks before that text message, Marco had called my grandmother. He hadn't called me. He'd called her. My grandmother is 83 years old. She still does her own laundry and tends a garden that wins informal competitions among her neighbors. But she also trusts her grandchildren completely, the way you can only trust people you raised from nothing. Marco told her he needed the money for a real estate opportunity. He told her it was urgent. He told her it would be good for the whole family. And then, I still struggle with this part, he asked her to call the bank and add him to the account authorizations. My grandmother, not wanting to disappoint her eldest grandchild, called the bank. The bank representative, to their credit, flagged it. They told her that adding a new co-authorizer required all existing co-authorizers to be present or to provide written consent. My grandmother, who genuinely did not understand the full implication of what was happening, said she would talk to me about it. She never did. I think she forgot. I think Marco told her not to worry about it. I think a lot of things now, in retrospect. What Marco didn't know, because I hadn't told anyone, was that 3 weeks before his text message, I had received a notification from the bank about the attempted authorization change. I called immediately. The bank confirmed that no changes had been made, that my co-authorization was still in place and that the account was intact. But the phone call put me on alert. That same week, quietly, without saying anything to anyone, I spoke to the bank about adding an additional layer of verification, a requirement that both co-authorizers be physically present for any withdrawal over $500. The bank said they couldn't retroactively change the account structure without my grandmother's in-person consent, but they could flag the account for enhanced review and add a personal notification system so that I would receive a call before any transaction was processed. I also called my grandmother's lawyer, the same one who had handled my grandfather's estate, and asked him to review the account documentation. He confirmed that the respective restrictions were legally binding, that educational purpose clauses were enforceable, and that any unauthorized withdrawal could be reported to the CRA and potentially constitute fraud. I didn't tell Marco any of this. I just waited. 3 weeks later, his text arrived. I finished staining the table. I washed my hands. I sat down next to my grandmother in the garden, and I did not tell her about the text right away because I didn't want to ruin her afternoon. She showed me which roses needed cutting back before the frost. She told me about a neighbor's new dog. We had tea. When I drove home that evening, I called the bank. The representative confirmed that Marco had made an in-person visit to a branch in Scarborough that morning, a branch nowhere near where he lived, I noted, and had attempted to initiate a withdrawal of $18,000 from the recipe. He had presented identification. He had claimed to be acting on behalf of his grandmother for an educational expense. The teller, following the new notification protocol, had told him the transaction was under review and that a co-authorizer would be contacted. The co-authorizer, me, had not answered because I had been staining a table and my phone had been face down on a workbench. The bank had placed a 48-hour hold on the transaction while they attempted to reach me. 48 hours. Marco, apparently confident that the hold was just a formality, had sent me that breezy little text and booked flights to Cancun. I called the bank back first thing Sunday morning. I told them I was not authorizing the withdrawal. I told them about the account restrictions. I gave them the name of my grandmother's lawyer. The representative put a full block on any outgoing transactions pending a formal review and gave me a case number. Then I called the lawyer. Then I called my grandmother. That last call was the hardest one. She was quiet for a long time when I explained it. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't understand. The quiet of someone who does understand and is deciding how to hold it. He told me it was for a good investment, she said finally. I told her I knew. I told her it was going to be okay. I told her the money was still there. All of it? All of it. Another silence. Then, he was always like this, even as a little boy. If he wanted something, he just decided it was already his. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Marco and Denise landed in Cancun on Sunday evening. I know this because Denise posted a photo on Instagram. I wasn't following her, but a mutual friend sent it to me, of their hotel lobby, tagged at an all-inclusive resort in the hotel zone. It looked expensive. It looked like something you book when you're certain your finances are settled. I spent Sunday evening at my grandmother's house. We ordered Swiss chalet, her favorite, always the quarter chicken dinner with the chalet sauce on the side, and we sat at the kitchen table that she and my grandfather had bought in 1984, and I helped her go through the account paperwork. I wanted her to understand every piece of it. She asked good questions. By the end of the evening, she understood exactly what had been attempted and exactly what had been stopped. She signed the forms the lawyer needed. She was steady the entire time. Monday passed. Tuesday passed. I went to work. I answered emails. I thought about Marco standing at a resort check-in desk, sun on his shoulders, already mentally calculating the upgrade to the ocean view room. Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a Mexican area code. I let it ring. 40 minutes later, Marco called from his Canadian number. I answered. There's a problem with my card, he said. No hello. No preamble. He said it like a man trying to stay calm and not quite managing it. The hotel is saying my payment didn't go through and I need to sort it out before checkout tomorrow. I said, what card are you using? He was quiet for exactly 1 beat too long. I was trying to use the transfer I made from the family account. It should have cleared by now. I said, Marco, the transfer didn't go through. What do you mean it didn't go through? The bank put a hold on the transaction. I didn't authorize it. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than my grandmother's had been. This one had heat in it. You? What? You blocked it? I didn't authorize an $18,000 withdrawal for a vacation? No. That money is for the family. That money is for education expenses. That's what the account is legally designated for. You know that, Marco. I've explained it to you 4 times. Lola said, Lola did not authorize this. You asked her to add you to the account without telling her what you were planning to do with access. She didn't understand what she was agreeing to. Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. I'm stuck in Mexico, Claudia. I have no way to pay for this hotel. Do you understand what you've done? I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like the particular stillness that comes after something that has been building for a long time finally arrives. A kind of quiet finality. I understand that you attempted to take $18,000 from an account that doesn't belong to you, I said. And I understand that you did it while our grandmother was alone and didn't fully understand what you were asking her to authorize. So no, Marco, I didn't do anything. You're dealing with the consequences of what you did. He said some things after that. Loud things. The kind of things people say when they're cornered and frightened, and the anger is easier than the shame. I let him finish. Then, I said, you should call Mom and Dad. Or use your own credit card. I have to get back to work. I hung up. They came home 3 days later. I know the hotel released them eventually. My mother told me in a call that I will describe in a moment. Apparently, Marco had a credit card with enough room on it for the hotel bill, just not for whatever extravagant extended stay he'd been planning. They flew back on a Thursday, economy I was told, with a certain grim satisfaction by my aunt who has never liked Marco's spending habits. My mother called me on the Friday. She opened by saying she was not taking sides. This is always what my mother says when she has already taken a side. She said Marco was devastated. She said Denise had been crying. She said this family was being torn apart and couldn't we all just sit down and talk about it? I said, Mom, he tried to steal $18,000 from Lola's account. He didn't think of it as stealing, I know. That's actually the part that concerns me most. She was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you've always been difficult about that money. I've been consistent about what the money is legally designated for. That's my job. That's what Lolo asked me to do. Your grandfather would have wanted the family to use. Mom, I said it gently, but I said it clearly. My grandfather opened that account so that his grandchildren could go to university without debt. That is what the money is for. If Marco needs money for vacations, he needs to earn it. I'm not going to apologize for doing exactly what I was asked to do. She didn't have a good answer for that. We talked for a while longer, circling the same territory. Before she hung up, she said she hoped I would reconsider. I said I hoped Marco would. The formal review took about 3 weeks. The bank cleared everything, confirmed no unauthorized funds had been transferred, and closed the case. The lawyer sent a letter, addressed to Marco and copied to my grandmother, formally documenting what had occurred, and noting that any future attempt to access the account without proper dual authorization would be referred to the appropriate authorities. I was told Marco turned white when he read the letter. Good. I want to be clear about something, because I know how these stories can sound. I am not a person who enjoys conflict. I am not someone who was waiting for an opportunity to punish my brother. For most of my life, I have been the one trying to hold things together, covering for Marco when he was late to family dinners, making excuses for him when he forgot things, staying quiet when he made comments about money that should have been challenged years earlier. What changed for me was not the attempted theft, as serious as that was. What changed was the moment I found out he had called my grandmother, an 83-year-old woman who trusts her family without reservation, who came to this country with $40 and a belt-fastened suitcase, who sat at her kitchen table signing legal documents with steady hands because she needed to understand what had been done to her. He used her trust as a tool. That's the part I haven't forgiven. I don't know if I will. Things are different now. Marco and I have not spoken since that phone call. Denise sent me a long text message about 2 months later that I read once and did not answer. It was mostly about how I had humiliated them and how money isn't worth family, which struck me as an interesting position for someone who had just tried to take $18,000 that wasn't hers. My grandmother is fine. Better than fine, actually. She seems lighter somehow, like something that had been sitting heavy on her shoulders has been lifted. She calls me on Sunday afternoons. We talk about her roses and her neighbor's dog, and sometimes about my grandfather, and what he would have said about all of this. I think he would have said, you did exactly right. I think he would have said, this is why I asked you. My grandfather saved that money dollar by dollar over 15 years. He didn't save it so that his grandson could spend a week at an all-inclusive resort and post photos on Instagram. He saved it because he believed, with the specific, hard-won conviction of someone who had built something from nothing, that education was the door through which the next generation walked into a different life. That account is still there. All of it. And when the time comes, it will go exactly where it was always meant to go. My brother called our grandmother's trust fund a family resource. He called it sitting there doing nothing. He called it unfair that he couldn't access it. What he never called it was what it actually was, a love letter from a man who died before he could deliver it. I've been delivering it for him. I intend to keep doing so. Some doors you don't let people walk through just because they have the audacity to try the handle. Some things you protect not because the law requires you to, but because the person who built them deserved better than to have them taken apart. My grandfather deserved better. My grandmother deserved better. And somewhere down the line, the grandchildren who haven't been born yet, who will sit in university lecture halls in cities my grandfather never visited, studying things he never imagined, they deserve better too. That's what I was protecting. Not a number in an account, not a legal designation, a promise. And some promises you just don't break.